will take your question and really interested in feedback around what we're doing in England and Wales around building an anti-racist police service. As the ACC said, thank you very much for your kind words, really appreciate it. And it is hard work, because I know that they're doing exactly the same as what I'm trying to do in Wales. So it is very, very hard work, actually very stressful, very challenging, but the good that comes out of this is just so incredible. So for the next 45 minutes or so, and it's really cold in here, which is why it's all I'm hoping that you can get something out of this, and if you just go away from one or two things that would be absolutely fantastic. And I see some new faces in the room, so that's great. Really good to see some better faces in the room. So I'm hoping that this works. Good, okay. So I will start by introducing myself. I am Dr. Alison Heydari. I will talk a little bit about my journey in policing, and we have a really far way to go. ACC talked about the internal bit, the external bit. Certainly in England and Wales, we have some significant way to go to build trust, confidence, legitimacy just within the police service. So the people who work for us don't necessarily trust the system and the institution. So that gives you an idea of how far we have to go. And I will start by saying, and I know that you know this already because I have spoken about this as my personal journey, I am the only black female chief officer in England and Wales out of about 280 chief officers. So that gives you an indication actually about how far we do have to go, even if we look within our internal service. And then of course when we look at how we serve, support our communities, we have an even further way to go. Because of course that definition between internal and external is, in my view, a red herring, because our communities work for us. I will start off by saying that. So although I will start, I don't want to be negative, what I will say is that in the last 18 months or so, in England and Wales we have progress. We've produced a progress report, which is something that would not have happened about 2 years ago. So we are going in the right direction. They are baby steps, but things are getting a little bit better. The feedback that I do get from, especially our police officers, is that it doesn't necessarily feel different now. So because we are looking at some significant cultural change, we're looking at reversing racism that exists not just in policing but throughout society, and we're looking at things like significant events, which I'll talk about in a minute. We're looking at those events that communities just do not forget. And why should they? This is part of who they are. And it's something that they won't forget, things that happened many, many years ago. Not just in London, because the Met is a focus for many, but when you look around the country, those events and those incidents remain in people's psyche. And it's intergenerational trauma that we're talking about in person. So I will start off by saying that. And when I talk about legitimacy, this is legitimacy by my definition of the Cambridge Dictionary. The bit that I am really interested in is the bottom bit. So it talks about the quality of being legal. It talks about the fact of being allowed by law or done according to the rules of law. And we can do those things. We can do stops and search, for example. And we can stop and search. And we can go through the procedure of doing that stop and search, but we can still walk away with that person who's doing stops and search actually feeling as if they have not gone through a very good experience. So this is not just about procedure, this is about respect and making sure that we do things in accordance So the bit that I actually rely on is the bit at the bottom, the quality of being reasonable, acceptable, but the state of being fair or honest. That's the bit I think that is part of policy in what we do. Although we sometimes get it right, actually there are many times when we get it wrong. Just by focusing on procedure and not thinking about the way we do something. And so, in my academic practice, procedural justice has been the bedrock of the way in which I've done policing with the last 24 years. And I'll talk a little bit about me in a minute, just so that you understand the context of why this is so important to me. But procedural justice for me is the thing that should underline every single thing that we do with policing. And I was reading about policing together, and it's got the words in it about being respectful and being fair. And those are things that I've pulled out here with procedural justice. So I will start by saying that is something that is very, very important to me personally, has featured my academic work that I've done, especially around domestic abuse, but also about community engagement. And it has featured in just about every single role that I have done throughout policing so far in my career. So that's me on the page. Tell you a little bit about me. So, one of the reasons why this is so important to me is that my parents came over towards the end of the Windrush era. And my parents came from Guyana, which is in South America. They settled in London. They met in London, and they got married about 4 years later. I was born. I'm the eldest Osborne. I'm the eldest of 4 children, and that's a picture of us down there. And I'm married with 2 girls, so I've got pictures of my 2 girls there. And they did follow me to policing, but they have incredible careers themselves, very, very strong women with very strong values. I'm mad about horses, so if I can get a picture of horses in to the presentation, I will. And, as if by magic, there's Stevie Wonder. So if I can get a picture of Stevie Wonder in the presentation, I'll use it. Because I'm mad about Stevie Wonder, and that's been really nice of work I've seen in concert. As a present from my husband, actually, got to the concert, saw Stevie Wonder, and then he handed me the news that I'm going to be presenting after the concert. I couldn't speak. So that gives you an idea of me on a page. And you're probably wondering, for the people who are observant among you, what about food is doing this. I'm mad about curry, mad about prawn curry. So if you're going to invite me around, prawn curry is a thing for me. But actually, one of the most important things to me is around community engagement. So there's a picture of me there with some ladies who were at the Simple Carnival. So those kinds of events, from those big scale events right down to the smaller events where it's just a few people having coffee, I think those are the opportunities really to build trust and confidence. Just to talk to people and have those ordinary, everyday discussions where they can share their experience. And so that gives you a little bit of an idea of me on the page. And when I talk times, I noticed actually as well that on the front page of this there was something there about leaders and values-based leadership. I think that is so, so important. So when I do speak to people, I talk about the importance of values. And my values were very, very clearly set when I was small, as a result of my experience with my mum and dad and their experiences in London. And when I say that, what I mean is that they were absolutely crazy about travelling. They travelled all over the world and they took the 4 of us with them. And as a result, they made friends from all over the world. And those friends used to come back to the house in London. And the house was always regarded as a safe place for people. So people come on Miami or other parts of the Caribbean, and they would have heard about the Crane household. So I've got a Scottish name. My name was Alison Crane, so romance history. And people knew that the Crane household was a safe place. But actually, as I grew up, diversity became just a thing. It was that people all over the world came to the house. They were different colours, religions, genders. They had different beliefs, but they were just people. And so diversity was actually not a thing. It was just that this is how the world works and this is my experience. So I'm quite sure that years later, that was part of the reason why I joined the police. So a little bit about me and my experience with policing. I joined Hampshire Police 24 years ago. And very early on in my career, I had that tap on the shoulder from learning and development who said to me, have you heard about a Home Office leadership programme called the Accelerated Promotion Scheme for Graduates? I hadn't heard about it, looked into it, and I thought actually this is an opportunity for me to develop my leadership skills as I go through my career. And so I was very privileged to have got through that process of getting onto that Home Office scheme. And as a result, when I was still a student officer, I started to develop an understanding of strategic issues important to policing. And as I went through, as you can see, I worked in criminal investigation with both negotiators at one point. As I got onto my daily job, especially with the CID, made me really interested in the dynamic between people, and that's where my interest in domestic abuse came into play. And so I ended up doing a master's and really understanding a little bit more about the dynamic, and that went on to reading for the PhD. But all the way through, even in the work that I did abroad, so I was a contemporary professor within the John Jay Institute in New York for 6 months. Even when I did that work, it became really clear to me that diversity, equality, inclusion and equity was the thread that went through every single job that I did. And then I started to think to myself, actually, what can I do to push this issue forward within policing? And of course, when I joined, there had already been discussions around the death of Stephen Lawrence. And that had really got me thinking about how I could contribute to this agenda within policing. And procedural justice became the thing that ran through every single role that I did. So I put myself forward to actually do what I do today on a much smaller scale. And some context for you. So I know that I think that some of you will know about some of these things. So the Bristol boycotts, for example. I don't know if you know anything about this, but it's really interesting that you see issues relating to equality, diversity, inclusion, equity, racism, running through some significant issues when you look at things that have happened in the future. And what I did before is I talked about people not forgetting these things. This is going back to 1960s, where Bristol Bus Company, they decided that they weren't going to have any black people working as bus drivers or conductors because they didn't like them. And that resulted in a boycott. The Mangrove Line in London in the 1970s. This was about police thinking that black people were criminals because they gathered of course, this was about the police, mainly in London actually. London was the big focus for this. This was around the Sutton vacancy law being used to identify people who were just hanging around because they must be up to something. And that gave the police the power to search them. The New Cross fire, which happened going back to 1981, communities have not forgotten that. The investigation, which actually didn't lead to anything. And of course we have the Bristol riots. I've already mentioned Stephen Lawrence murder, and we've got the murder of Anthony Walker as well. And of course most recently, the Heydari scandal. So when any of these things happen, it just adds to the trauma of communities, and they do not forget what's happened in the past. And coming right up to where we are now, even I would say things that are not particularly race related, for example, the death of Sarah Everard, that murder by a servant police officer, that would affect all communities. So when you put this into context and you think there are certain things that black communities will be particularly upset and traumatised by, and then you add the other things on top of that, then you can see why we are in the state that we are in at the moment. And so we have a very, very far way to go. And of course, cases impact we talked about, the internal things that she's really leading on as well. So, and I have already mentioned the fact that I am the only black woman who's the chief officer actually in the whole of the UK. And that's in 2025, it's not the place that we seem to be in. So we do have a very, very long way to go. And then of course I come to the political piece. So up until the Labour came into power, of course we had the incident where impartiality was the focus for the OSEC, and that report has now been circulated and published. And race is really politicised. Taking the knee, should officers take the knee or shouldn't they? This is a whole debate on its own, and something that is certainly discussed at length in Wales. And of course, when we go further afield, and all the issues that are being raised in terms of EDI with Trump, one of the things that I do fear is that some of that will then be translated into the narrative that we have out in the UK. So there's a lot going on around race, and of course, race is not the only issue that we are concerned about. It is a significant issue for policing and for the criminal justice system as a whole. So what I'm going to talk about is, I will come back to the Peace Race Action Plan. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about my other national role that I have, which is out-of-court resolutions. So I have for many, many years, I would say for the last 20 years, after seeing for a few years how policing actually works and getting some strategic insight. For me, I think we have a big issue with not making the most of diversionary activity and prevention. So there are some forces that are better at it than others, and when I'm talking about forces, I'm talking about forces in England and Wales, in which I'm from. I'm coming back to 2021. So I joined the Met in June 2020, and then shortly after that, there was an advert for chief officer to take on the national role in addition to the day job around out-of-court. It was then out-of-court disposals. And because I think of my values and my leadership values around that, I thought to myself, actually, what can I lead on a national role? And one of the first things that I did was rebrand from out-of-court disposals to out-of-court resolutions. So out-of-court resolutions really, as you know, is looking at what we can do to keep people out of the criminal justice system, how we can address our that it doesn't escalate into further criminal behaviour. And certainly in Individual Wales, we've got some legislative change at the moment, and that change is focused on reducing the number of different options for activities. So things like cannabis warnings, cat warnings, those are going to be deleted and soon to be implemented is just two main areas that you can deliver out-of-court resolutions through. The reason why I'm telling you about this is because we have a fantastic opportunity, certainly in Wales, to use this legislation to build trust and confidence within communities. And I talked before about procedural justice being the thing that runs through everything that we do. And I think that we've got an opportunity now for procedural justice to link into trust and confidence and reduce the number of people of colour within the criminal justice system. Because what happens is that, for example, there are black boys who will be arrested and taken into custody. They may have an opportunity to take a community resolution. But if they don't trust the system, they won't look into anything. And so what we can do is we can push out-of-court resolutions more in communities where trust is low, and then there's an opportunity for those communities to take advantage of those out-of-court resolutions. And of course, this links very much with the recommendation 10. In the Land Review was around deferred prosecution, that model where you can utilise the opportunity for people to not to admit, but to be responsible for whatever they've done. And if they do diversionary activity, they won't be charged. So there's a clear link for me in my business plan and this work around building trust, confidence and legitimacy and enabling out-of-court resolutions to make a difference in the criminal justice system. And we are doing a lot of work around deferred prosecutions because at the moment it is unsupported with a statutory framework. So we're pushing the legislation to make some changes onto the new government so that it is supported. And if we can do that, we can roll it out beyond the pilot sites across the UK. And anything is possible from the point. And we're doing this, and we're really doing a lot of work with our forces in England, Wales, for them to be ready to implement this and to start thinking about how they can support further prosecutions. And this is a slide that is purposely busy because it gives you an idea of the sheer number of people that we're working with, organisations, communities, and it talks about really the importance of communication, digital management that we're doing, data collection, and also looking at how we can work with police and crime commissioners to have diversionary activities under a national framework, and then this will hopefully work towards thinking about how diverse communities' needs can be achieved through that framework. So I want now come to the main things I will call it around building police community trust and confidence with the National Police Race Action Plan. This is a bit of a timeline. So the Police Race Action Plan has actually been in place for a few years, but the progress was so slow, really so slow. We're going back to June 2020 when, as a result of the death of George Floyd, police chiefs came together to talk about the importance of building an anti-racist police service. So we are going back quite a long time, and it took 2 years for the plan to actually be established. And when the directorship, we had a couple of directors in place. When the directorship was advertised, this would be going back to around June or July 2023. I looked at the adverts and I thought, do you know what? I'm a frontline policing commander in the Met. I've been the lead for neighbourhood policing across the whole of London. So I've got some experience, especially growing up in London. And so I thought I would show the job. And I was successful, which is fantastic. And in August of 2023, I became a director. And it completely needed a refresh. So I know our is slightly different to Scotland's, but these are the bits that we use within the National Disgrace Action Plan. And these have been refreshed and been reviewed as a result of external and internal community engagement. We have put in place a whole raft of ways of communicating with our communities, just to make sure that we are concentrating on the right thing. And the first one is about internal cultural inclusivity, of course, as mentioned before, the importance of building that trust and confidence within our communities. So certainly in England and Wales, we have many issues within our EDI structures within the UK. We still find through the data that we collect that black officers, mostly officers, but some staff, tend to be misrepresented and overrepresented in the disciplinary processes that we have. So that is of great concern to our internal communities. So we're doing quite a lot of work around that. I'm working with some big groups on Connect and looking at ways in which we can do things different. And certainly myself, my staff officer who's sitting at the back, Angeline, and my deputy, we are very force at the moment. We're doing force visits and we're finding out exactly what forces are doing. So forces have replicated this structure within their own force. So the national listen to the local, then we go out to the local and we find out exactly what they're doing to support this work. And there is some very interesting work, which of course would be great to share with Scotland, and the same for Scotland to share with us. Some interesting work about looking at what happens before this conduct process actually starts. So the disproportionality tends to be the bit that happens before. Why is that? We're looking in detail around that. And we have recently taken on another link into what I've just been talking about in terms of representation of black women within policing. So we've been doing some work around that. So those are two of the big things that we're doing. Use of powers, of course, stop and search has been a focus for us. So when we look at forces in the data collection across different forces, the disproportionality actually looks very different. In some forces, black people are 2 times more likely to be stopped and searched. In others, it's 10. So we are looking at different forces to find out what are their plans. Do they actually understand why that disproportionality exists? And one thing that we do talk about in England and Wales is that the importance of understanding the data, why something is as it is, or reforming. So if you looked at your data and you don't understand why you've got that disproportionality, you need to reform your policies and procedures, your training, all of those things. Community engagement, we have a very active pillar. So very recently we have, I say very recently, for a year now, we've had a national beauty reference group who've been absolutely fantastic. They're made up of 75 people across the UK. They're made up of barristers, academics, teachers, all walks of life, and they're giving us advice on how the plan should go. But they have also been involved in helping us to think about the impact of communities on, for example, operational effects, which some of you may have heard about, which is recent rights. So they are getting involved in really helping us to understand the community impact of some very contemporary issues. And the fourth work stream is around protection. So we get a lot of feedback from black communities that they feel that they're over-policed and underprotected. And we've been focusing on some discrete One of the very interesting things around missing people. So young black people who go missing tend to go missing for longer. And we're looking at why that is. The work stream lead for that, the coordinator, has been doing some fantastic work with communities, but also organisations that support black missing people. And we've got our enabling work streams, which are around data evidence and communications. So data, we absolutely need to be better at collecting our data. We really do. So that gives you a bit of an idea of what we're doing in policing in Wales. And we have progressed. So in the last year or so, we've been able to deliver a progress report. We have really looked at the governance, for example, that community reference group has been set up, but we've also looked at the governance and the structure of the plan itself, so the national team, is it fit for purpose? Our headline really is around building a community-based police service. So we've looked at every single action that's in that plan, and what we need to ask ourselves, what we have been asking ourselves, and we constantly ask ourselves is, are those actions going to make a difference in that? And if they're not going to make a difference, why are we actually focusing our energy on those actions? So when I came in this direction in 2023, we sat in the dark room for 2 days in Martin, which is in Coventry, and we went through every single action to make sure that those actions will fit the purpose. And so that was really important. And we have gone through the same thing recently as well, on the back of community engagement and going out, especially to young people, because their voices really need to be amplified. So asking our young people through all sorts of things, social media, face-to-face, through other young people going out and speaking to their peers, through, we had opened up grassroots organisations to come and bid for what they wanted to do to engage with especially young people. So we had a very comprehensive engagement strategy to get feedback. Because at the end of the day, this is called the Police Race Action Plan, but actually it's not our plan. This is our response to communities and what communities are telling us they need. So this is the communities plan. And one of the promises that I made when I became director was that I did want the next version, the new version of the plan, which is going to be published in a few weeks, to be a version that's important to the police. It's really, really important that this is a reflection of the engagement we have had with communities, and this is what they're telling us is important. And there's been a lot of learning actually from our programs. So at the moment, I do have an ACC from the Ministry of Defence working with me, who's looking especially about how we can embed the plan going forward. So there are very, very clear structures within policing that we have to take advantage of. What I don't want is, I don't want the Police Race Action Plan to be something that sits up here. I need it to be embedded in all the business practices across England and Wales. And the only way we can do that really, or one of the ways we can do that is by exploiting the structures that we already have. So we have a number of committees. We have other chief officers like myself who are responsible for different areas of the criminal justice system. We need all of those committees and those agencies getting on with stuff. You know, we are a can-do organisation, you know, we see things, we get on with it, we're task focused. But what we're not always very good at is evaluating what we've done. So we might be doing something for years, it's never been evaluated. So that piece is really important. And a little bit more about some actual things that we had delivered. So we focused really on products. When I became the director, one of the things that we were getting from feedback from was, you asked us a million times about what's important, you asked us a million times, told you a million times about what's important, and they wanted us to get on and just start delivering, so that's what we did. So we used that first year to really progress with some discrete areas of work, like Black history education, which is now in a portal for all forces to have access to, and thinking about how we can deliver things to help forces on their way to becoming anti-racist. Because the local delivery of this is really very, very important. The central team, our lead at the moment, has been successful in achieving some funding for the next year until March 26. But the central team is not going to be around forever. So the local delivery of this is so important. Each force can have a process in place, have the government structure in place to be able to deliver something that is going to be future-proof going forward, so that they can continue on that journey to anti-racism. Because this is not going to be achieved for the next 5 years or the next 10 years. This is a plan that has to continue for years and years, and there's an ACC Dennis who talks about what we see on his phrase, which he talks about as being embedded in the DNA of policing. So where we want to get to is for everybody to think when they put a policy together, that it's not a policy that's been submitted without community consultation, but when they have their processes and they go through communities, their business plans have got something on there about race and the impact of what they do on building anti-racist service going forward. And how what they do is going to affect communities, and how what they do is going to build trust, confidence and decency. That's where I want to get to. So I talked about the governance structure. So one of the important things for me is around that scrutiny. So I have recently been in talks with the government about what funding can be achieved for us for the scrutiny element of what we do, because it's important as we go through this that there's always an independent view and a scrutiny element. People who can say, actually, that's not going to work, in this particular issue, or that's a really good idea, I think it's something in this force, let them know what you think. Really important that continues. So we have the ISOC, which is the Independent Scrutiny Oversight Board, currently led by a barrister called Alison Johnson. Her and her exec team are fantastic at giving us feedback. They are very particular about what we do, and they constantly give us feedback to make sure that we are on the right track and we're going in the right direction. And I talked about the NCRG before, which is the Beauty Reference Group. Fantastic to give advice please. So any contemporary issues, they can give us some fast time advice from different viewpoints and perspectives, you know, the academic perspective, community perspective, all of those things are really important. And we have been building some relationships with civil society groups as well. So civil society groups such as Stopwatch, the Alliance for Police Accountability, they have come on board gradually talking to us about how we can embed this going forward. So all of those things are really, really important, and of course the wider engagement continues. So our next steps is that we are on track to publish the next version of the plan, which will be by March, the next few weeks actually. So So that's going to be really good. And then we continue to think about that transition and that future proofing. What can we do to build relationships with our external stakeholders and our internal stakeholders? And I'll include the Police and Crime Commission is really important here. His Majesty's Inspectorate as well, that's I met a gentleman here from the Scottish equivalent of HMI. They're really important because what they need to do is they need to have a police race action plan and those questions on their list so that they when they go out to forces know every question on what they're doing and what impact that's having. So that's extremely important for us to have that opportunity there. And I have already talked about the importance of embedding what we do in the existing structures. There's other things that have really come to fore in the last, I'd say 3 or 4 months actually. Some of those have been about using language. So there are forces who are struggling with what's the right language to use. They don't want to get it wrong. We've done quite a lot of work around that. We've also continued with our community engagement strategy, so using smaller community stations to really get in touch with people who quite often don't have that communities and things is really, really important. And thinking actually about how we can put some kind of user guides together and thinking about doing kind of head start talks. So forces can phone in and they can understand as a result of the benchmarking activity that we've done, what's out there, what's working, what is in practice, what can we share. So a lot of work there. And this really is about the importance of the narrative that we're sending out to forces at the moment. How can procedural justice actually be realised practically in what we do? So I mentioned, for example, research. There are many areas of business where the tenets of procedural justice can be included in the thought process around policy making, practice, delivery and training, all of those things. And we are seeing some pockets of really good practice as we go across the UK. I won't go into any detail here, but why does it matter? 60% of people from black backgrounds have confidence in the police compared to 68%. Actually, 68% is not that way. It's nothing to be proud of, really. But then when you get into the detail of looking at how real communities, it is even much lower. And I always talk about not only the police, but also certainly the data in Wales, is that black women are about 4 times more likely to die in childbirth than white women, which is in 2025 is unacceptable. And when we talk about thinking about reform, what can we do to not only the criminal justice process, but also looking at that wider piece about how we can work with others. And of course, a slide here just to recognise that in Scotland there is a lot of work that's being done to do that. So before I take questions, I will just finalise a bit of a summary. We are in the midst of a critical incident, and I will say that again, we are in the midst of a critical incident. This is a long-standing critical incident. Policing, the criminal justice system and wider public services are here to serve all communities, but we're not getting this right consistently and universally. Our criminal justice, education and health outcomes tell a stark story. I believe procedural justice is the key to achieving equality, driving equity where everyone thrives. Policing together was established in 2021 to drive the change necessary to keep all communities safe. On behalf of Scottish communities, to address disproportionality and outcomes for Black communities. Communities want and need to see change, feel protected with confidence that they will be kept safe. The opportunity to share, develop and strengthen all works is now. The opportunity to work in true partnership is now. The time to be brave, be humble and innovate is now. Communities are crying out for their voices to be heard and for their lived experience to be valued. The time to cherish that is now. As thought leaders in this room, we cannot afford to miss this key opportunity in history to drive tangible change by working together to build solid relationships and make a difference. There are so many benefits to getting this right, but for me, the right is that building trust, confidence and legitimacy is the right thing to do. The opportunity to change is now. Thank you.
There's one question that I'll start with this, and he's got a question ready already. I think we should get to hear you.
Hello. Hi, I'm Dr. I'm a senior researcher in Scotland. I guess, first of all, great presentation, I guess my question is, in terms of the data and evidence being an enabling process to that internal culture, I wonder if you could perhaps reflect on the expectations of data that your colleagues may have had regarding the police race action plan or the community. Have you met those expectations? Were you surprised by any expectations regarding data and performance progress? Are there any opportunities that you have met or you're working towards that process?
There's a few questions in there.
Sorry.
Those surprises in terms of what communities wanted. So what communities want basically is they want to force us to collect data which paints an accurate picture of what's happening so they can tell them not because they're getting better or worse. Is basically what they're asking for, and we're nowhere near that. So there are, so we've got, there's probably similar in Scotland, we've got the annual data return of data that has to be, all forces have to collect considered to bonuses. But on top of that, there are bits of data that some forces collect that others don't, or there's bits of data that all forces collect that are in different systems, so it makes it difficult to identify a trend across, nationally. So what we are working towards is we're working towards working with governments in most. The government has said actually what we do need is a national performance framework. What they've also said is that they're going to be working towards the qualities bill. So any opportunity for the qualities bill, we've said we absolutely need to be in the room to contribute to that, because as a result of that, also is kind of into the place it is. And we are working really, really closely with the reform team, there's a police reform team that's looking at specifically working with the government around reform and working with them around the expectations of that national performance framework. So I think what I'm really keen to do as a director is to make sure that we're not trying to adapt the world and change things over here when there's other more strategic stuff that's going on. And I've talked about HMR before. I think they are really important in setting the tone of what's expected, because they can also help to intervene in those conversations that are being there. So there are quite a few bits and pieces of the jigsaw that are kind of fitting together. But we do have quite a long way to go before we get to the point where we can accurately look across the nation to see what's working and what's not. And data, it's good and library, that's basically quite the same thing. But we're in those conversations to be able to kind of drive changes necessary. Does that answer what you
It does,
Thank you. Any other questions from your guests, please?
this is about a process for, so it's qualities impact what we're talking about basically. So the question is that, are we looking at ways in which in Wales we can make the quality impact assessment more of a, less of a procedure but actually built into the mindset of, have I answered that one? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so a really good example of that is some recent work around Operation Flex. So what we found in Operation Flex is that there was a very good response to community impact and assessing what that's going to look like outside of policing. But we didn't really have anything internally. So we have had conversations about Operation Flex. We have come up before, I'm sorry about that. What we have also done is we've started to have some conversations about, let us just think about the conversations that need to happen without all being there to ensure that. I think it's very, I think it's the priorities there at the moment. But the work that I talked about before, which was the work of the communities and the NPCC portfolio holders, I think is going to contribute to what you just talked about. So that when you're in the room, you are talking about things, hopefully, it will start to be that people automatically see, but actually, we think we're doing this particularly, but how is that going to impact on race without having a form there to have to do that? But that takes a cultural reform. That's a big, big cultural change, certainly for policing. So we continue to have those conversations with our portfolio holders and with the communities. I go to the Chiefs Council every quarter, so all the Chief Constables get together every quarter. I go to those meetings and I present on the police race action plan. And I ask them the kind of questions that you're talking about. How are we naturally just talking about this as being important? So I'm kind of doing a bit of a pincer movement around different areas, but we're nowhere near there yet because it's a cultural change.
Thank you. Monica, do you have any questions on my thing? Okay, so Megan and then Victor. Thank you so much for your presentation. I'm Megan O'Neill, I'm one of the Associate Directors of the Scottish Institute for Policing Research, and I lead the Police Community Relations Network, so your work is very much of relevance to my network. I was very interested in the plan. Thank you so much for your presentation. You mentioned consulting with communities. How do you connect with those communities that traditionally are more difficult to reach, especially from people coming from a policing organisation?
Okay, so I hope you can do this, but so I have completely come away from talking about communities being difficult to reach because they're not. So they're where they are. You know, whether they live, where they go to church, and all those places where we can automatically go to and we can talk to them. The question for me really is around how can we build partnerships with other people who've got access and trust to those communities. And we've done a lot of work around that actually. Recognising what you said is that there are some communities that actually are so police and tools, so how can we build enough trust with some of those communities? Because if you go to some of them, they probably won't talk to us anyway. But I do think that the police sometimes use that as an excuse, and I think that that's universal criticism. So certainly within my own role as a policing commander in London, I'm doing things. So this is not just about communities, this is all, I find out that they're having an affair somewhere and I'll just turn up. And then people are like, oh, fantastic, you can't see things, come in, have property, all that stuff. And that's how we build relationships. But for me, one of the big things that we have done as the plans is having directors to build relationships with the people who have got trust in those communities. And I personally think, this is a very personal view, this is not my organisation or anything like that, I think we don't do enough to build those partnerships to kind of work through, for example, the voluntary sector, feedback around kind of going to different things that are happening anyway. So HomePack is one example. I don't know if you have that in Scotland, but HomePack is where they get lots and lots of young people together, and they get music, and they do presentations and all of that. And we have had an awful lot of really, really good feedback by going to things like that. So I think there's something about building relationships with people who've got access to those other people.
Final question from Heydari. Do you want to? I think you can project. I think you can say
Alison, welcome to Scotland. I think somebody's looked for the coldest room in So the race action plan has got a list of really incredible people who's tried to lead it, Martin Hewitt, Tyrone, and I commend you for taking on the challenge. And looking at the next steps, that's a list of work that's going to take a lifetime. But I just want to ask, I mean this is the personal question, I just want to ask, if finance wasn't the problem, resource wasn't the problem, some of your colleagues who are ambivalent are not a problem, what would be the one thing that will bring about step change in this plan?
So, I think you've heard me speak before, and I think, so I'm going to choose two things, I'm sorry about that. But, probably one thing. The one thing that I truly, truly believe is going to make a difference, if we were to put in place procedural justice, that mindset into every single thing we do, that would pay absolute dividends. And that procedural justice piece, I think, to overlay that with engagement and communication, is those two things together, I think would be absolutely amazing. And some of that is due to resources actually, because we can put aside quite a few resources to pay, for example, grassroots organisations to do work on our behalf. But some of it is about the way we put policies together, our procedures, all of those things. It doesn't actually take any money at all. It's all to do with it. So I think that we need to get those two things right. The communication piece, for me, is really important because there are some things that some forces are doing which are absolutely amazing. We've done a benchmarking activity every single force has been visited, and we have a massive spreadsheet of all the really good work that's being done. But you will have one force next to another, and they're not been talking to each other, they're not telling each other about the work they've been doing. So the communication piece is important because I think our staff, officers and communities need to understand the work that's being done. But they also need to understand that we desperately need help. Because this is an opportunity that if it does come around again, it's not going to come around for a very, very long time. So communities need to understand where our gaps are, they understand where they can support us to do better. But if we don't do that, we'll simply just way and communicate that we won't get anywhere. So I do think it's those two things. In a war, if we get that right, we would fly.
Thank you so much. I think we'll bring the questions to a close, but Alison will be around for a while afterwards to talk to people and share if they would like to discuss further. I would just briefly now ask you to come and present the medal, the James Smart medal to you.
It's nice.
Mutually cold hands.